In this God of War Ragnarok video, I'm going to talk about my early impressions for the game. I've gotten to play about 5 or 6 hours or so thanks to Sony Playstation, who graciously gifted us a code to check out the game. We'll have a full review later on, but for right now, I want to dive into our hands-on impressions, what we think so far about the first 5-6 hours of the game, as well as give you guys some information about the game to help further inform you about how the game plays and things like that. I apologize, but we're not allowed to capture any footage for this video, so you're going to have some new screenshots that we're going to be showing you, as well as some footage that's already been released by Sony. In the full review, we'll have more gameplay footage, and obviously, this impressions and that review will both be spoiler-free, so I won't be diving into the story or the characters or the setting of the game in any way, shape, or form. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to mention is that I got my copy on PS5, and the game was a 98 gigabyte download. It is an absolutely massive game. So for those of you who are wondering what the size of this game is, that is what it is on PS5. I would expect it to be somewhat similar on PS4, even if it's a bit smaller. As far as the graphics of the game go, they are absolutely phenomenal. Definitely an upgrade over the original God of War. And the textures are some of the best I have seen in gaming. I did end up playing the game on performance mode instead of resolution. This still looked very, very nice. But the resolution mode has like very drastically less FPS than performance mode. Performance mode seemed to be about 60. I didn't notice any drops below that in my game time. So it's at least 60 from what I can tell. But the resolution mode seemed closer to 30. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was markedly lower. So if you're somebody who prefers higher FPS versus the higher resolution textures, you're definitely going to want to go with performance mode when playing this game. I also want to mention that there is a ton of accessibility or customization options in terms of what you can do with the settings, the UI, motion blur, camera shake, camera sway, puzzle assists, auto looting, auto traversing like vaulting without having to press buttons. You can customize completely the controls of the game, and you can make the UI font bigger. There is so much customization in terms of making the game screen look exactly the way you want and making the animations the way you want. I have frankly never seen so many options in a console game ever. You'll see a lot of these in PC games, but even PC games, most of them don't even have a fraction of what this game has. So for those of you wondering like how much customization options are there in terms of how you can set up the game to play, there is an absolutely staggering amount of them. Getting a little bit about how God of War Ragnarok plays a little bit. If you played the first game, you should be very, very familiar with God of War Ragnarok. For starters, the game, without getting into the story at all, picks up after the events of the first game. So if you're familiar with the first game's events, which I won't go into in case you haven't played, then it's not crazy to expect that this game picks up some point after that, kind of showing the ramifications of the events that unfolded in the first game. And so that's what you're going to be exploring in the first 5 or 6 hours of the game. I will obviously keep playing the game and, seeing the rest of the story, etc. But at this point, while I'm making this recording, I don't know what happens all the way through the game, obviously. I'll have a better idea when we do our full review later on. But just for the moment, that's sort of, to give you the context of the game, that's kind of what you're going to be doing in the game. Now, as far as the gameplay itself, it's very, very similar to God of War in the sense that you begin the game with the axe, you begin the game with the chains, you have the shield that you can parry or block with. Combat feels very familiar. You can, build up the gauges on enemies and then hit R3 and tear them in half and do other cool animations. You have rage that you can build up and enter, rage mode, etc. So the gameplay itself, particularly in combat, feels very, very similar to God of War in the beginning of the game. I don't know how it'll pan out by the end of the game, but it's very, very similar in that respect. The equipment of the game, like the armor, the weapons, the runes that you can upgrade your weapons with, all that feels very, very similar as well. Like you don't have like random loot qualities dropping all over the place. They seem to be static spawns as far as I can tell, or very, very minimally randomized. And, you can craft gear, etc. So it seems very, very similar. If you played the first game, you're going to know what you're going to be doing here. It's not going to be like a big mystery. It's not going to take you long to figure it out. You're going to know exactly how it works, and you're going to know what to look out for and what not to. Moving along to the skill trees and such. The skill trees have like a bit of a UI revamp, but for the most part, they seem somewhat similar to the first game. The skills themselves are different, but the format of it is kind of similar. And, you're unlocking mostly active skills that you can use in combat. And, you can usually slot some of these. There are some passive skills, but not many. And you can upgrade, different skills for the axe. You can upgrade different skills for the chains and for Atreus. So it's pretty similar to the first game in terms of like what you can expect from the skills as well. So if you're familiar with that, you should be right at home there as well. And in terms of exploration and like puzzles and things like that, they use very similar puzzles to God of War 1. Exploration is handled in a familiar manner where, you kind of go to a certain little section and there are groups of enemies that spawn and you defeat the enemies and, you explore the area, get the loot, and then move to the next little section. And there's like a checklist of that zone or whatever area that you're in with all the things to find there, including like ravens and things. And once you've completed all those, you obviously, as you complete things on that checklist, they'll get ticked off and, you can use that as a way to track your progress of each zone if you're a completionist, which I think some people who play this game are. So you'll be able to see what's left to do in that area or if you've completed everything so you can move on to the next area. And kind of in classic God of War fashion, just like the last game, there are often things that, you require you progressing the main story in order to get tools, kind of Metroidvania, to come back and be able to, progress certain other areas you've already been to. So you won't be able to do everything as you come across it in the game. You'll need to progress the main story and you'll have to come back through pre-existing areas, not unlike the first game. So kind of just to sum up my thoughts so far on God of War Ragnarok after the first 5 or 6 hours, I would say that mechanically speaking, at least, nothing's really jumped out at me as being like blowing my mind. Like when I played God of War 1, that game blew my mind when I was playing it. There was a mystery to it, how they rebooted the franchise, how the mechanics were going to work, how the combat was going to work. You were learning how to play the game for a good stretch of it. When you play God of War Ragnarok, if you've played the first game, it's all very familiar. It's like playing a Souls game after you've played a Souls game. You know what to do. You know what I mean? No one has to teach you how to block and parry and attack. You know what to do there. And if you're familiar with exploration, then you know how to explore. So there isn't anything yet I've kind of gone like, wow, they really changed blah, or there's this new thing I have never seen before. So I'm hoping that more and more of that will happen as we progress the game. Because if you remember in the first game, you sort of unlock the weapons as you progress the game. And I imagine at this point, we've already unlocked those, so they can't like relock them for you. So I'm hoping that maybe there are new weapons further on in the game, new skills, maybe new skill trees, or maybe new mechanics that they haven't revealed yet. I haven't played all the way through the game, so I'm kind of reserving judgment for them. For now, I would just say, if you liked God of War, you should like God of War 2, but I haven't seen anything that really separates it or sets it apart outside of the story. Stay tuned, though, because we'll have our full review in a couple of weeks, and we'll give you all the nitty-gritty details. Obviously, we're going to keep that as spoiler-free as possible, too, not only in the audio, but also in the gameplay footage. These games are very, very heavily story-driven, and I don't want to ruin that for anybody. So if you want a good review that's going to be spoiler-free, stay tuned for a couple weeks for that. Make sure you bookmark this channel because you'll want to see that review.